Good afternoon, I'm Clay Mitcham, of course, one of the two assistant principals here at C. Hannah School. And we're going to talk a little bit about an induction and mentoring program for new teachers, all year veteran teachers, but when we hire new teachers, not only into our school, but into our school system, talk a little bit about information that I feel like is very pertinent for that student, for that teacher to know. We'll talk a little bit about legal issues, a little bit about IEPs, just overall information that you deal with every day and I deal with every day that new teachers wouldn't necessarily know, but make sure they have heads up on information that can be legal or ethical issues for them, so we make sure and get them started off on the right foot. Along with the fact that we have the imperative of the mentor teacher. Some of you have probably been mentor teachers, so some of this information will be things that you go over with your mentee as you mentor them, but just legal and other issues that we want to make teachers aware of. The first thing, and it's not many points here, but there's a lot between the lines here, as you know, from being teachers when it comes to student rights. One of the first things that we want, or that I want to make sure teachers are aware of, is the FERPA rights for students. Explain to the teachers what FERPA is and what rights students have when it comes to issues of confidentiality on academic matters as well as disciplinary matters. I know in my experience, a lot of times, and I was guilty of this as a teacher also, we're not really as adamant about being confidential about behavior issues, simply because, so many people come in contact with that student in that day. And one of the things I want to make sure that I cover with the new teacher is, number one, a student has right to confidentiality through FERPA, meaning the only people that I should have conversation with about that student's academic performance are people that have direct influence or association with that student academically. In other words, other teachers that teach that student, guidance counselor needs to know that information. Administration needs to know that information because they have direct contact with that student. If I teach 6th grade and I have a friend that teaches 5th grade, I shouldn't be discussing specific academic issues with a particular student with that teacher, not because we're so much worried that teacher will do something wrong with that information, but they don't have a need. They're on a not need to know basis. They don't have direct contact with that student. Same thing with behavior issues, and that can become a problem, and I want teachers to understand that can become an issue very quickly if a student is in disciplinary trouble. If they've done things that can have them suspended, can have them possibly put to a hearing for alternative school, even corporal punishment. I've seen in the past, you probably have two parents are very edgy about people knowing that their child received a paddling or their child was suspended, and because their problem is they don't want people knowing what action or what behavior their child did to deserve that punishment. So I want to make sure new teachers understand, even though it's very easy to forget, excuse me, and go out and talk about, Johnny did this in my class there. I tell another teacher, can you believe Susie did this? Those are discussions that can get us into legal issues if we're not careful, if we're discussing those things with people that don't have direct contact with that student. Which is what I have here to kind of follow up, to reiterate it again, the second point. Students do have legal protection, and in education, as you guys know, and as I've seen in the past 5 years especially, legal issues have expounded exponentially in education, especially when you involve a student that's in special education. It's very easy to get involved in a lawsuit, and there are lawyers that specialize in representing families that have legal complaints or issues. And they do have legal protection. That lawyer does have legal ground to stand on if we're sharing information that we should not be sharing with other people. So I want teachers to understand, I don't want teachers to be scared. I want them to deal with students fairly and consistently, but I want them to understand, outside of school especially, we have to be very careful about what kind of information we share about that student. Moving on to probably the most litigated issue in education today, I would probably say would be dealing with students in special education. First thing I would want a teacher to understand is that IEP that they go over and look at is a legal binding document, meaning if a teacher is sued for not following certain parts of an IEP, that IEP will hold up in court. If it can be proven in court that the teacher did not follow just a small part of that student's IEP, the student perhaps didn't get the number of minutes a day that they're supposed to get assistance in reading, for instance, that's going to hold up in a court of law. So I want teachers to understand, when you sign off that you've looked over that IEP, you're signing a legal binding document that will hold up in a court. The most important thing I think for new teachers when it comes to special education students is that they always find and begin immediate communication at the very beginning of the year with the case manager for that student. I would stress that teachers find out from the very first day of school what students in your classroom are special ed. Second thing, find out who in your school is the case manager for that student. And like I've put here, begin immediate communication from day one with that special ed teacher. Now I think we do a better job in education, excuse me, with No Child Left Behind, that special education teachers, inclusion teachers go in and co-teach in the classroom versus the days of old when they pulled students out to their own classroom. So that makes, to me, communication a lot easier because the teachers are in those rooms. But I would tell a new teacher, you know, who most likely doesn't know a lot about the ins and outs of special education, find out who those students are immediately, begin a relationship and communication with that case manager so that they can tell you their expertise in special education. So my point to a new teacher would be, that's what they do. So I would get very comfortable with them quickly, and so that they can keep you abreast of what's going on with that student, what we can and can't do, how do you need to handle issues with that student, all those things, because that special education department and teacher is going to be keeping communication with administration. So let that new teacher know, if you do your part and you communicate with them, you, that teacher, and the administration of that building are all staying on the same page. Because like I said, you ladies know that from teaching for many years. That's the quickest way to get into legal trouble in education, is dealing with students in special education. Like I just said, important, I stress the teachers not only keep that case manager aware of what's going in your class academically, also keep that case manager aware of what's going on with that student behaviorally. As you know, a lot of students, not all, but a lot of special education students have either a behavior plan or they have a behavior goal within their IEP. Not all of them, but even the ones that don't. When we discipline students, y'all know this, if I as an administrator put a student in school detention or suspend a student, I'm making a change of placement. I get up to X number of days I can do that, and after I do that, I've got to meet with that IEP team and we got to make a decision, do we need to continue this or not. So even those simple things of behavior, I want to stress to the teachers to do that. And if a behavior plan does exist, as some students that we in all schools have, to make sure that that behavior plan is being followed to a T. If that behavior plan says Johnny is allowed 3 prompts before he's corrected, then he needs to get 3 prompts every day. So just small things like that I want a teacher to understand. You don't have to be afraid of it. Just make sure that you and all of us know that plan. And if I know that plan and I'm following it, we're going to be fine. And the last thing would be notify the case manager and the principal and administration if there's any abnormal issues in behavior or academics. Like I just said a few minutes ago, just to reiterate that again, if that student definitely starts to show signs, even with the inclusion teacher's help, of struggling academically, we need to immediately have communication with that case manager and administration. We need to put our heads together immediately. Same thing with behavior, because behavior is one of those, like I said, that can eventually become looking at a change of placement, and we need to have all our ducks in a row, make sure we follow that plan to the T, so that if that time comes and we decide as an IEP team that's the best placement for that student, we've done everything we need to do to allow that to happen. Talking about student information, I would tell a teacher, next thing, be aware of any custodial issues that you have with a student in your classroom. Reason being, teachers, good teachers, are communicating with parents. You need to be aware of what parent you need to be communicating with. If mom and dad are divorced and mom has primary care, we need to make sure we're making her aware of everything. Not that we can't communicate with dad, but we need to make sure a primary caregiver is aware of that. Primary caregiver gets the notification of all meetings, those kind of things, so that we don't have an issue where dad can say legally, hey, wait a minute, you were supposed to come to me first and you didn't. Never share any information about a student of any kind on social media, Facebook or Twitter, and I know that's popular in today's society, and I think there's a lot of good things about those things, Facebook and Twitter, but just make sure a new teacher is very aware. When you go home, yes, that time is your time, it's your private time, but be very careful about anything you mention, not only to do with the student, but to do with school. I would even suggest to a teacher, I would make my conversations, if someone tried to corner me in about something that went on at the school that day, I would make the answer very short. I wouldn't even cross into that area. If I'm not discussing things about school, then I'm not discussing students, then I'm okay. And I would say to new teachers, be very mindful about any participation that you have in social media. Of course, we don't have the right to tell people on their private time they don't have the right to look at Facebook, Twitter. Again, I think there's a lot of good uses for those. I would just want a teacher to be mindful, especially a new teacher, especially a young new teacher, because that's part of their generation is technology, communication, social media. Keep in mind now, Mr. or Miss So-and-so, you're a professional. Any information you share about school and it gets over towards a student, like I mentioned in the first slide, you can possibly break some ethical and legal issues on the student's right to have confidentiality. So I would just suggest to that teacher, don't be afraid of social media. If you enjoy social media, enjoy social media, but I would not carry conversations about students or school. I wouldn't develop an online relationship, even if it's a proper relationship, with students. It's not that we don't want students to know that we love them, we care about them, we're regular people, but in my opinion, that's just, you're too easy getting into an area that you can get yourself in trouble, even if you have the best intentions, because as we know, students sometimes can turn things around. I appreciate your time. Thank you.